Oh, Richard, will you start the Teams event, please?
Chair, you're now live and ready to go.
Exciting. Right. Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lady and a gentleman. I'm Councillor Davis and I'm Richard Davis, and I'm chair of the Housing, Neighbourhoods and Leisure Committee. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's meeting, which councillors are now required to attend in person, following the expiry of the Coronavirus Act regulations, which permitted online meetings. We are meeting in a socially distanced layout in the council chamber. See. And with a small number of seats provided for the press and public. We will be using new equipment connecting the chamber to a Microsoft Teams meeting. There is a live stream available through Teams, and a recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the council website afterwards. So it's just as accessible as always by the public. So this is something we haven't done on these meetings before, but I'm going to ask the councillors to introduce themselves, please. Tell us who they are, perhaps what their role is, and a little bit of extra information that the rest of us don't know. You don't have to do that. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Or sing a song, whichever. So I'll list through the names just to sort of coordinate it. Yeah. So Councillor Debs Absalom.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Debs Absalom. I'm Norcote Ward and a member of the committee here.
Councillor Barnett Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Adele Barnett Ward, Caversham Ward Councillor, lead member for Neighbourhoods and Communities, and my fun fact is I can solve a Rubik's Cube.
Kind of information we need. Councillor Emberson.
Yeah, good evening, Chair. Councillor Ellie Emerson, lead councillor for housing and Minster Ward councillor, and I'm not going to give you a fun fact because I'd like to watch the football tonight.
We have apologies from Councillor Hacker this evening. Councillor Hoskin.
Yeah, hi, I'm Graham Hoskin. I'm the lead councillor for health, wellbeing and sport, and obviously revisit my view from the 1980s that only the kids that were weird were able to solve the cube. But
Councillor Lang.
Good evening all. I'm Councillor Mickey Lang, one of the Whitley Ward councillors and also the new Vice Chair for H&L.
Thank you. Councillor Magnani.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chair. I'm Councillor Helen Magnani for Tyler's Ward.
Councillor McGonigal.
Councillor Brenda McGonigal, Park Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Clarence Mitchell for Peppard Ward.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Alison Boffo-Coles for Weekly Ward. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connell.
Evening all. Councillor Mary O'Connell for Tilehurst Ward.
Are people trying to work out who's next in the alphabet? It's quite good, isn't it? Who got Councillor Rowland? She's next.
I was trying to work on my fun fact. Councillor Karen Rowland, Abbey Ward Councillor and the lead member for Culture, Heritage and Recreation. And my fun fact is that my accent really is a West Reading accent.
Councillor Rynn.
Good evening. Councillor Jenny Rynn from Kentwood Ward.
Councillor Rynn. Councillor Raj Singh.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Raj Singh of Kentwood Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Sakale is not here in person. She told us she was intending to dial in. I don't know if she...
I believe she's joining in through the live event rather than joining in on Teams.
Just to make people aware, the regulations state that you could attend because any member of the public can attend, so you can attend, but not vote if you're not here in person. And last, probably figured it out by process of elimination, Councillor Josh Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, Josh Williams, Park Ward.
Thank you, councillors. So Obviously, this is a new democratic year. Welcome to the new members of this committee. Welcome indeed to new members of the council who are going to have the treat of being on the. Well, you've got the best committee basically. So congratulations, well done.
Obviously, thank you.
So let's kick off. Firstly, items. Any declarations of interest, please? Everybody's got any declarations of interest? Okay, so item 5, we've got the minutes of the last meeting held on March the 10th. Is everybody happy to sign that into the record, or have you spotted any glaring omissions? No. Thank you. And then we've got item 6 is the minutes of the Community Safety Partnership. If we're happy to sign those into the record. Let's do that. Yeah, we're happy. Petitions. We don't have any petitions. That's item 7. Item 8. So we do have a question from a member of the public. Mrs. Godfrey, who I know quite well, is here in person. Welcome, Mrs. Godfrey. Would you like to ask your question, please?
Good evening. Christchurch Meadows are a well-used open space on the banks of the Thames in Caversham. They lead via various paths to Christchurch Bridge. Besides the usual mowing and bin emptying, a small amount of regular maintenance takes place. To the maintenance list needs to be added the ditch that runs through Christchurch Meadow. The ditch is there for a reason. It's part of the flood defence for Lower Caversham and needs to be kept clear. There is no question that the ditch is owned by RBC. In 2018, in a letter, it was accepted that some works are now becoming overdue and hope to plan some maintenance later in 2018. Part of the ditch was cleared in 2019. Approximately 100 metres wasn't touched. Volunteers from Caversham Globe also cleared a section. The ditch is now so overgrown and silted up that it is debatable that it can carry out the function it was designed for. Although Christchurch has a new bridge and access paths, many of the problems of which the ditch is one, identified in Thames Park's Vision Statement 2004 remain. Recommendations have largely been ignored. There is a reluctance to engage with the local community and groups. It is now 3 years since Parks hoped to clear the ditch. My question is, will RBC clear the ditch this financial year, 2021/22, and give an undertaking to carry out maintenance on a regular basis?
Thank you, Mrs. Godfrey, for that question. What I will do now is I will invite Councillor Rowland. No, will I? Yes. No, it's Councillor Barnett-Wood, isn't it?
No,
it is.
no, it is.
Councillor
Yeah.
Rowland, yes, it was initially wrongly assigned, but
Yes,
yes, I'll invite
yeah.
Councillor Rowland will reply, give you a reply.
Right. Good evening, Mrs. Godfrey, and thank you very much for your question. The ditch, which is also known as the Danelle, is an ancient drainage ditch which serves to remove surplus water from the meadows, but also as an important wildlife corridor. The council carries out a range of maintenance tasks in Christchurch Meadows, including grass and hedge cutting, tree works, and a clearance of marginal vegetation along the riverbank. Part of the regular litter picking work at Christchurch Meadows is to remove as much litter as possible from the ditch, and every few years, scheduled maintenance and clearance work is carried out by the council as required to maintain flood defenses without adversely affecting wildlife. As you noted, the most recent occasion was in the summer of 2019, when our teams removed self-seeded trees and flailed the vegetation on the banks. The 100-meter section that was not cleared then is the next area to be completed when weather conditions allow again this autumn. The Environment Agency carried out dredging works between 2008 and 2011. However, this was only done when required for flood defense purposes. The Parks team will carry out a scheduled inspection of the ditch and aim to carry out some clearance work in the autumn of this year, subject to ground conditions and available resource. The meadows are usually too wet to support heavy machinery required for the works between mid-November and March, and the bird nesting season prevents any clearance work between March and September, thus limiting the opportunity to carry out clearance work to largely between September to mid-November. Prior to any work starting, an assessment will also need to be made of the possible effects of the work on wildlife, as periods of non-interference are important. Managing the council's large estate of open spaces involves considerable resources, and as such, the council is always appreciative of the efforts that volunteers do in many open spaces and parks in Reading, and we work frequently with a number of groups in those efforts. We are always happy to facilitate the involvement of community volunteers in maintenance and improvement works. Officers in the Parks Department would welcome any offers of help in clearing the ditch, and I would certainly urge you and others to get in touch with myself and officers to progress this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland. Now, Mrs. Godfrey, you can have a supplemental question. Should be related to the first question, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Got to find it first. Right. This sort of got overtaken by what I saw down Christchurch this afternoon. I was going to ask a question about the geese in Christchurch. With RBC Parks Department declaring Christchurch Meadow towpath a health hazard, that partly answers what was my supplementary question about the geese. The fact that it's a health hazard is that there's so much geese poop down there. But I was quite shocked to see it this afternoon. But okay, I'll carry on, don't mind. The problem is entirely of Parks Department's own making. There's been no attempt to control the geese at all. So how do parks intend to control the excessive number of geese? They can find the nest and pick the eggs. The excuse last time this was asked was the geese nest outside the borough, so therefore they couldn't go outside the borough to find the nest. Rounding them up and taking them elsewhere, or as they're a health hazard, a call. Now, last time I mentioned that, which is a few years ago, I was told, oh, the committee will never go for it. And there's a notice up saying it is a health hazard. And it says, is the notice asking people to bother Andy, Park Supremo, or Pedro, Park Supervisor, about parks for people, not poop, their way of engaging with the public? I thought God was the ultimate authority. Clearly, parks needs a shake-up. How does RBC intend to do this? Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Godfrey. Firstly, I mean, I wouldn't say it's entirely the fault of the officers. I mean, the geese do have some part to play in the problem. They are the main instigators of the poo. You know, this has been a perennial problem actually in Christchurch Meadow on the Thames, and that every few years it comes up. And actually, I think I myself had been involved in trying to get some action a few years ago. The consensus of people was that actually wildlife comes with what wildlife does, but cleaning is, you know, is certainly an option. Anyway, Councillor Rowland, that was kind of tenuously linked in that it was talking about Christchurch Meadow. Do you want to reply to that one?
Right. Well, to be quite honest, the situation with the geese is not exactly in line with the original conversation here and the original question. I am beyond happy to have a discussion with you and offline or at any point about that and see what I can do to solve it, but it's nothing that I'm really prepared to answer this evening, and I really apologize about that I can't give you an answer immediately. But I am more than happy to speak with you and arrange a meeting with you, get down there with officers and speak about what we might do with that particular situation together, if that's amenable to you. I'm sorry, I'm just not prepared to answer a question on geese this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland. I mean, the thing is, Ms. Godfrey, there's no problem normally in you asking a series of questions in advance, because basically you get better quality answers because we can get answers from officers and members can prepare the answers as well. So I'd suggest that probably that's a better way of of approaching something like that rather than asking it as a supplemental, really. But thank you for the questions anyway. I'm sure your ward councillors would be happy to get involved as well.
Okay, so I'll be in touch with you, Councillor Rowlands, and perhaps we can meet up and carry on a discussion from pre-COVID. All right. Right then, thank you very much.
Okay, so that's the only question from a member of the public. Thank you. We don't have any decision book references. We've got a question. Oh, yeah, sorry, we don't have a separate agenda item for the members of the councillors, but there is a question from Councillor McGonigal. Councillor McGonigal, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Not a week goes by without a resident reporting a disturbance from a neighbour playing excessively loud music day and night. I have suffered this myself and reported to Environmental Health. I filled in those diary sheets for over 2 years before the offending tenants were asked to leave. This process is too long. The stress and misery of not being able to sleep, your children not sleeping, not being able to sit in your own garden and have friends and family around is overwhelmingly unfair. Asking to turn it down is often met with abuse and increased volume. The police will not always attend as it is not considered high priority. There has to be more that can be done and within a shorter time frame. We're all entitled to some peace. Can this matter be given some much needed attention? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGonigal. So invite Councillor Barnett-Ward, who's the lead councillor for Neighbourhoods and Communities, to make the response.
Thank you, Chair. This is really a question, I think, about asking for a briefing on the procedures used by this department, which can't be answered in this committee where we've got a very limited amount of time. So what I have asked is for officers to prepare a fuller briefing, which will be sent to Councillor McGonigal after this meeting, going through the process, and she's of course welcome to follow that with officers. What I've got is a summary, which I will read out now. So the Environmental Protection and Nuisance EPN team is responsible for investigating complaints about alleged nuisance from both commercial and domestic sources. Other teams, such as the Antisocial Behaviour team, deal with noise caused by Reading Borough Council housing tenants. The team deal with approximately 1,000 service requests a year related to noise nuisance alone. Officers resolve many of the nuisance issues reported to them, either by informal action notices that are complied with. It can take some time to resolve complex or borderline cases, but 2 years is unusually long, and most will be resolved more swiftly. Where cases do take a long time to resolve, this is because of the statutory legal process that the council is obliged to follow, and which of course we can't control the statutory process. We can only comply with it. The team will always try to resolve the problem informally in the first instance, giving the alleged perpetrator a chance to change their behaviour prior to more formal action being taken. This does extend the timescale of cases that progress to a legal process, but an informal resolution makes it more likely that the neighbours will be able to get past the dispute and have an improved future relationship, so it is always worth trying, and the majority of cases are resolved at the informal stage. The EPN team sympathises with residents and recognises the impact that noisy neighbours can have on people's lives, but they also have to remain impartial and ensure that there is strong evidence to justify enforcement action. This takes time to gather and requires continual input from the resident to achieve a successful outcome. Investigating domestic nuisance is complex, as the noise is often sporadic and unpredictable. The team have introduced the Noise app to make evidence gathering more efficient and reliable. To take legal action, officers must prove that the noise meets the threshold of nuisance, which is set out in legislation and case law. This means they will not be able to take action to deal with noise that's causing annoyance to neighbours if it doesn't reach the legal threshold. The team is committed to using all powers available to resolve noise nuisance complaints, but it's not a simple and quick process if the alleged perpetrator does not cooperate or if the noise does not meet that legal definition of noise nuisance. These are matters out with the council's control.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett-Ward. Councillor McGonigal, have you got a supplemental? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm not sure you can have a supplemental if Councillor McGonigal didn't have one. I think that's the way it works.
I think I can, Chair, but I don't really want to. I've just wondered if I could request that the briefing that Councillor Barnett-Ward generously offered to send could go to all members, because I think that'd be really valuable.
Were you, good question, thanks for that. Were you offering a face-to-face one, or was that?
It's a written response specifically to Councillor McGonigal, but if she's willing to share that with other members, that's entirely up to her.
Yeah, is that okay? Yeah, okay. Item 9, there are no decision book references. Item 10 is it's the public part of the report that we discussed in part 2 earlier, and it's asking for spend approval as part of the local authority new build programme phase 4. And Sarah is on Tablis. Would you like to introduce the report? Your enormous face is on the screen right now.
Thank you, Chair. No, we have no concept of what this looks like from the other side, so I was concerned I might be a bit large. This report provides an update on the current local authority new build programme, which has to date delivered 174 new local authority homes and has schemes in progress to deliver another 307 homes by 2024. The report also details proposals and funding arrangements for the next phase of the programme, known as Phase 4. Spend approval of 1.4 million is requested in order to start progressing this phase, and it is intended that the existing capital budget will be realigned to enable this spend to take place in this financial year. Budget and spend approval for a further 30.6 million will be sought as part of the 22-23 medium-term financial strategy process. In order to enable efficient delivery of viable sites, a number of delegations to the Assistant Director of Housing and Community are requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was done really well, considering you have no idea how you're coming across, but you come across brilliantly. So thank you. Councillor Emberson, would you like to say something about this report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose what Sarah wouldn't say, because she's an officer, is, you know, they should be patting themselves on the back for all the work they've been doing. And I think this report gives us the opportunity as a committee and as a council to acknowledge the work we have done, what we are doing and what we intend to do. You know, we have a huge council stock and we continue to grow in terms of numbers, and it has really meaningful impacts for people who are really struggling. I know we all have casework where people are looking to get on the register and have housing, and this goes a long way in making sure we can reduce the waiting list, which is currently at around 4,000. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank all the officers, noting all the different schemes that we have across the borough, which many of the councillors here will have seen or known about in their own areas. And going forward, we'll continue to liaise with local councillors to make sure that schemes are consulted on in the proper manner with residents, and that local letting schemes are put in place where applicable, because we know, referred to, you know, in the report, allocations data that family homes are desperately needed in Reading. And we know that that's what we have been delivering and propose to continue delivering. So I'm really proud of the work we're doing, and I just think it's a great opportunity to thank officers for the work they're doing and will continue to do.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yeah, it's a fantastic effort on an ongoing basis. It's been going for a few years now, and it's really making a difference. Councillor Josh Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to echo a few things that Councillor Anderson just said, but I wrote them down, so I'm going to say them. But thank you very much. Councillor Anderson is absolutely right. I'm sure we're all agreed on this one, but we should thank her as well as lead councillor for housing. Green councillors very much support the building and acquisition of new council homes for our residents. A report on the Chronicles website just last week talked about how Reading is one of the least affordable places in England for first-time buyers, and they quoted the average property price in the town of an eye-watering 450k. That's the average. So that's part of a picture that builds up to a housing crisis in Reading. We need our amazing teachers, care workers, NHS staff, posties, binmen. We need everyone to be able to stay, live and work in Reading, and we need more affordable homes. So exactly as Councillor Emerson said, these plans are not massive when compared with the scale of the problem, but every single home can change a family's life. As a slight aside, I note section 6.2 says that where possible, building will apply passive house principles, which is excellent. I'd much prefer passive house standards, but principles is a great step in the right direction. I could train using the exact same principles as Usain Bolt, but I would not reach his standard. I think that's clear. But it's a really positive move in the right direction. Given every single home can be so important to a family, And we do need a bit more joined up thinking as well. A council home on my road in Newtown has been empty for well over 4 years now. And I think that's a missed opportunity. But it's one I'm sure the new lead councillor will be working hard on already. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you. Just again, in agreement, it's marvellous that these homes are going up. Every time one of these houses are built, it's giving individuals, couples and families a place to make their own, something that I'm sure all of us value enormously, and we know how much it's going to mean to those people moving in. So, you know, well done, and well done to the officers. My only tiny worry is that as we very sensibly and carefully use up these spaces, where do we go for the rest of the people on the waiting lists? You know, do we have more area that we can use? Thank you.
I mean, they ain't making any more land, are they, really? We can build them underground, possibly, or something like that. Yeah, Councillor Emerson, do you want to come back? I mean, just I can comment, the level of voids actually on council properties is very, very low generally, and there will be anecdotal evidence of certain, you know, there'll probably be certain circumstances we don't really know about on particular properties, I guess. But across the board, the level of empty council homes is very low because, you know, we have very high demand for them, and it makes sense, and the team work really hard to make sure they are low. But Councillor Emerson, do you want to come back on any of that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks to Councillor William for his thanks to me, but I've only been here 5 minutes, and I probably should have thanked all the previous lead councillors, including Chair, who you know, has done his time as the housing lead, because this is a long-term project and started probably, well, before I was born. Let's be honest. I agree that there is a housing crisis, and it's not just in Reading, it's nationally, and we're doing what we can. The allocation scheme consultation and proposals will be coming back to this committee in September, and that will form part of the conversation about where we go with the waiting list. And I hope that that will make it, well, it will make it easier for people on that list to understand where they're at and what their possibilities are with council housing. I also agree regarding the passive house principles, but Councillor Williams will know how difficult it is to make schemes viable, and, you know, making our own sites possible is something a lot of local authorities don't do. So to then have to have the, you know, climate change stuff to do on top, it is really difficult, but we will definitely pursue doing that, as we have at Wensley Road and Arthur Hill, and we'll continue to do so. We have a great empty homes officer and strategy, who I've liaised with in my own ward, and I'm sure he'd be willing to have another session. I think he's done those annually in terms of the work he does, but I'd definitely be happy to run one of those sessions again for members about what the possibilities are, and if Councillor Williams wanted to refer that specific house, happy for him to do so. In terms of where we go, I think that's a really, you know, difficult question. I think we have to be really mindful of the lack of land, which we are, and you'll see, you know, some of these schemes listed in the table are 1-2 bed houses, and they're smaller, and there's only a few, and then we've got the more major developments, and we're running out of land. So I think we have to be pragmatic in our approach, and we've done that through the local plan in ensuring that affordable housing is provided at planning level in terms of new developments, but we have to go further and look at shaping the town and, you know, previous estates. And I think, you know, that's a conversation for the whole council, and I, you know, I really welcome your comments on that and your thoughts. So, and I'm sure officers will add on some of those comments as well, but that's just my perspective, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Emerson. Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really good point, Councillor Khan. I'm sorry I was flippant about it, but, you know, it's a densely packed urban area. We haven't got loads of big fields. So yeah, we're you know, some of these sites have been around having under feasibility since when I was the lead member for housing. And yeah, of course, the other thing is that it's much more expensive per property to build one property on a location rather than when you've got a big field and you can build 100, because you've got to move all the equipment around, etc., etc. So there are particular challenges in Reading, as Councillor Emerson said, and actually to get, you know, even the you know, numbers like 300 is very, very difficult to get, and land's very expensive as well. So it's a really good point you raised anyway. So if no one else has got anything to say, if I can move on to the recommended actions, does Zelda want to say something? Or oh, it's just appeared on the screen. That's all right. So can we agree the recommended actions? Paragraph 2. Effectively, we're approving the spend of up to bringing forward a spend of £1.4 million into this year. We're noting the intention in advance to spend an additional £30.6 million, but we're not making a decision about that. We're just noting it. And then we're doing some delegations on 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, so that officers, in conjunction with Lead Council, can kind of get on with it. So if there are no dissenters, then I think we're happy with that. Thank you. Thanks, members. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Good night.
Moving on to agenda item 11 is about glyphosate. We're going to hear about its use and the possible alternatives from Andy Edwards, who's on by video link from his house.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies if advance if I cough during this presentation because I'm struggling from a cough and a cold presently. The report this evening provides information on how Reading Borough Council presently uses the herbicide glyphosate for weed control across its public estate in Reading. Glyphosate does remain the most cost-effective method of weed control available. However, the council is committed to continuing to reduce its use of this chemical. The report also outlines the present legal position regarding its ongoing use, and also the research officers have carried out to benchmark with other local authorities over their current position, and also to learn more about any alternative methods of weed control that they use. Contained in the report is a section on the alternative methods of control. It's recommended that we carry out a summer-long control trial next year of these alternative options against glyphosate as a base, and then also report back to November 2022 HNL with the results of the trial and any further recommendations. It should be noted that we did intend to carry out this trial this summer, but the disruption due to the pandemic has meant that it wasn't feasible this summer, which is why we are keen to take on the trial next year. So thank you, Chair, and I welcome any questions you may have on the report.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks for making the efforts to attend the meeting, and obviously wish you a speedy recovery. Councillor Barnett-Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is a good report. I'm glad that we're looking at this. It's a tricky issue because we have to balance the views of different groups of residents in this. There are some residents who would very much like us to cease using glyphosate. And there are others who actually aren't that bothered by it and wouldn't be very happy about us just tripling or quadrupling the cost of weed removal without going through proper trials. So I think it's important that we do trial the different alternatives, that we have a report back to this committee for it. But because we know that some residents really do feel very strongly about it, that's why we've included the trial of giving residents the power to opt out of glyphosate use in their local area. It's patterned along some of our local schemes that we already have, like Raise, Adoptive Street Clearing, Play Streets, School Streets, putting the power in residents' hands, letting them take control of what happens in their area. I'm very grateful to Mandy Shilton Godwin of Manchester Council, who was the person that I discussed this with, because it's an idea that she told me about our officers and their officers who have spent time looking at how this could work in Reading. And I'm really excited at seeing how this happens. So yes, I think it makes sense. We can't do it now. There's too much else going on. We're about to talk in the next report about some of the other things that are going on that are putting pressures on our parks and street clearing staff. But I would encourage very much residents who are concerned about glyphosate to sign up for the trial, opt out, take control of your own streets. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor McGonigal first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm absolutely delighted that this issue is receiving some attention. I think increasing numbers of residents are very concerned about the safety of this substance, especially as its use has at times been rather indiscriminate, having been sprayed in playgrounds and on riverbanks. In 4.1.1, it says the lack of weed control creates a perception of neglect, but there are clearly more people now who realise that weeds and wildflowers are of major importance to our declining insect population. While glyphosates or similar may still be required to control invasive species such as Japanese knotweed, its use on most footpaths, fences, gates, etc. is certainly not essential. When considering alternatives to glyphosates, maybe we should consider simply leaving some of the weeds to grow. It is better for biodiversity after all. I mean, when did we become so obsessed with controlling the natural world, leading to the climate chaos in which we now find ourselves? I am concerned that this report, despite being extensive and considering many options, may lead to this council continuing to use glyphosates until banned entirely, which may never happen. We all know that when the licence is due for renewal, there will be lobbying and donations from powerful corporations to ensure it can be relicensed over and over again. The idea of opting out for streets and maybe whole areas is excellent, and I feel sure there would be plenty of uptake for this. We will support this action, and it is at least a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGonigal. It's the sinister big weed killer in the background. So, yeah, sorry, Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you. Yeah, I also think this is a super idea. Just a quick query or whether or not it'd be possible. Will any signage be put up in the trial areas to explain to residents why the normal methods of weed clearing aren't being done? I mean, I'm sure we've all sort of in the past when we've left the verges to grow for very good reasons, for biodiversity, for insect corridors, all of those kinds of things. But we have residents coming up to us thinking that the council's just trying to cost cut, you know, which isn't necessarily the case, or certainly not the primary driver for it. And I've always found that people are a lot more receptive on the whole to changes in council routines if we're keeping them fully informed about why we're doing it, about the ethics behind it, about the benefits that they're going to experience from it. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connell. Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to address a few points because even though this is in Councillor Barnett Ward's portfolio, it does very much wander into mine with open spaces and parks and the way we manage weeds and also wildflowers and those parts of the park that are not always so easy to get to. I had the great privilege, and I think it was mostly because you had a previous engagement, of getting out and throwing some torch flame and trying out a method. They didn't offer it to you. I'm really sorry. It was a lot of fun, but it was a method of taking care of weeds and growth around like benches and things like that in parks. That's one of the things that will come into a bigger trial next year. And it was very interesting. But as I was there, and this is a point I really want to make, we were talking about the human labor involved, the time, the expense of the machines, and the expense of the operation in and of itself. So what I wanted to make sure that people understood too is that when we move away from glyphosate, we are moving into something of significantly greater expense. And I don't know whether that's I think it's been briefly mentioned, but that is where we are going on that. There is, there are people indeed that are kind of out on the verdict with glyphosate. I think that most of us feel that it is something that needs to be used in very limited quantities, and really Japanese knotweed is one of those things that seems to be nothing else can get to Japanese knotweed except something like glyphosate. So it's a very, very difficult thing, but I'm really looking forward to this program. It was slated to go forward this past year and has been very well laid out. And I think that Councillor Barnett Ward's idea of bringing in communities to be able to opt out of glyphosate and to even self-weed their streets, things like that, are really, really exciting. It's a really, really great way of getting around it. Now that will also come with some kind of contract with that neighborhood too, because when we say we're just going to have weeds grow, weeds can grow and also crack and ruin our infrastructure very, very quickly. And so it's really important that we understand that is also part of weed control is keeping our infrastructure intact too. Within the parks, obviously, we look to around playgrounds and everything, try any other method, try the torch routine, all the other things that are outlined in the report. And it's definitely something that we will look to go to. So I am looking forward to this, and I think it will be a really, really great thing. And again, with the neighborhoods idea and concept of opting out could be something that was really worthwhile and gets the community engaged. So thank you.
Councillor Magnani, you can.
Okay. I second what Councillor Rowland's saying. I'm a very keen gardener, and I do love to see areas looking nice, but my recommendation is a good hoe, because it takes up a weed without having to use any kind of chemical, just a little bit of body work. But you know what? It's so good for your mental ability, and gardening has got to be the way forward for everyone. And we've proved it over the last 18 months, how many people have taken it up as a hobby. It's helped them mentally, physically, and we're getting rid of the weeds and making places look very pretty. Excellent if we can keep doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Magnani. So Councillor Barnett Ward's going to mobilise an army of weed pickers. Now, am I right in saying that what we're going to have back, results of that trial, we'll come back to here, and we'll have costs and effectiveness report, and we'll be able to make a judgment as to what we think is the right thing. Okay, do you want to sum up?
Thank you. Yep, so the report will come back to this committee, whoever's on it, in November 2022. Just want to pick up a couple of points, some of which Councillor Rowland has touched on. I do agree that one person's weed is another person's wildflower, but it is dependent on where they are. With my other hat on, I'm CEO of Reading Association for the Blind, and unweeded pavements are a massive issue for our service users and for other people with mobility issues. The pavements will crack, they will distort alongside roads. As a cyclist, I don't want to be having to batter my way past overhanging vegetation. So there is a place for weed control, and we do need to do it. We will be putting out communications with residents to explain what's happening. We shouldn't have to label areas, because we will still be clearing weeds in the trial areas. We'll just be doing it differently. But certainly there was publicity around Councillor Rowland and her flamethrower in the park, which was never offered to me. I would have accepted that. Yeah. And we will be making sure, I love to talk to residents about what it is that the council's doing and to explain why we're doing it. And I would also urge Councillor McGonagall to not prejudge the results of the trial. We're going to go through a trial. The report will come back to this committee November 2022. I don't think there's any reason to be gloomy about the result of that trial at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Barnett-Wood. I think hearing the results of that trial might be a reason in itself to restand in the all-out elections next year. Just to hear that. So if no one else has got any points, could we move to the recommended action? That's paragraph 2. We can, as printed there, you can read it yourself. But we're basically doing a trial, as described. Anybody dissenting from that? Cool. Okay. Thank you. I think that's agreed. Okay, so moving on to item 12, I believe there's food waste collection service been started, and Councillor Barnett-Ward is going to tell us. But first, Andy, again, do you want to introduce the report, Andy Edwards?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the main rollout of the curbside food waste collection service, and also the rollout of 140 litre residual bins for 56,000 residential properties across Reading. The main phase of the project is now complete, and the results of the first 4 months of the rollout are contained in the report for everybody's information. I'm pleased to report that Reading's recycling rate is now consistently over 50% since the rollout for the first time ever. And this is higher than the 44% originally projected when the project was being developed. The take-up of the food waste collection service and the yield of the food waste collected has also been higher than anticipated, and this has resulted in over 2,500 tonnes of food waste being diverted from landfill since the project started, and demonstrates the council's commitment to a carbon neutral Reading by 2030. The new service continues to settle down, with the waste crews getting used to the new rounds, and the team are working incredibly hard to deal with any issues that arise during this period. It's presently not being helped by increased staff absence that we are experiencing. This is higher than normally anticipated due to the pandemic, which has meant that it's taken longer than desired for the rounds to settle down. And for this, I apologise. However, the staff are committed to keep working tirelessly with our contact centre and communication colleagues to deal with any issues that residents highlight. And I'm confident that the rounds will bed in the very near future. The report also provides information on phase 2 of the project, which is also the final phase, and this is to roll out the food waste service to the remaining 14,000 high-rise and low-rise flats in Reading. It's proposed that we start this last phase in July until pre-Christmas, and then take a break to bed in these new blocks, which is a key lesson that we've learned in both the early adopter and main rollout phases, before returning to complete the project the following June. Thank you, Chair, and again, I welcome any questions on this report.
Thanks, Andy. And once again, thanks for making the effort. Councillor Barnett-Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, to bring in a service change of this scale would be an impressive achievement at any time, and our team have done this in a pandemic. And I know I've said this before in other meetings, but it bears repeating. When this was scoped out, when this was planned, we didn't know what was coming down the track. And we could have, and it would possibly have been easier to have said there is too much going on, we're going to pause this. But we've made a commitment to tackling the climate emergency. This is an important part of that, and we pushed on. I'm really glad we did. You can see the results. We've got 80% participation rates, average of 2.7 kilograms per household per week. We were expecting 1 kilo. And that's testament to the crews, it's testament to the staff, it's also testament to the residents, who I know many of them were really keen to see this service come in. There were also residents who actually weren't that keen, but have given it a go, have seen the benefits. Some of you may have seen our early adopter video, which was a resident who got in touch to say, I didn't think it was going to work and I didn't really want to do it. But it's been brilliant, and he's been a fantastic advocate for the scheme, and there have been many other people as well, informally on Facebook groups, talking to their neighbours, helping people to engage with this scheme. We've had, Andy touched on some of the challenges that we've had. There's been a lot of learning. The last few weeks have been extremely challenging for the waste management team. The rising rates of COVID cases in Reading has really hit this team, and it's because of the way that they work. So if one member of a crew has a member of their household test positive for COVID, we have to pull the entire crew. That member has to self-isolate for the 10 days. Everyone else has to self-isolate until they get negative tests. And we don't have spare crews. So that instantly has an effect on the team. They've been pulling in people from highways. People have been coming in from parks. We've had the management team have been going out, doing the rounds in the morning, going back into the office and doing their usual work. It has been punishing for them all. We had a couple of weeks ago, we were slipping behind. The guys have caught back up. I shouldn't say guys, the crews have caught back up. It's not all men. But it's still very challenging day to day of people we cannot control who is going to have a positive test in their household, who's going to fall ill. As we say, poor Andy himself is not well and is phoning into this meeting. So I really want to thank the crews and the highway staff and the park staff and the waste management staff for their hard work. But also I'd like to thank Reading's residents for bearing with us. We've been putting out information through our social media channels explaining what's going on and what we're doing to tackle it. And overwhelmingly, the response has been understanding, and residents saying they value the crews, they value this new service, and they understand what a challenging time it is. And I'm really grateful for that, because everyone's got a bin. This is a really important service to our residents, and it does impact people when your collection is late, and no one is going to pretend that that isn't an inconvenience to residents. It can be a significant inconvenience. We never want to have a bin be late, and I'm really appreciative of the crews for their hard work in these very, very difficult times to roll out this new service, but also to maintain the existing service. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Barnett-Wood. Yes. Waste is one of the few truly universal services across the town that affects absolutely everybody, and to affect a major change to it, particularly at this time, is a very, very difficult thing to do, and it's not to be underestimated. It's likely that the level of problems that we've all had reported really quite modest compared with the enormous change that there's been. So yeah, thanks for the officer team who've been responsible. Councillor McGonigal.
Thank you, Chair. I think, considering the restrictions of the COVID situation, the rollout of the smaller landfill bins and the food waste collection has been highly successful. And I think that there's been a couple of small hiccups, but that's due to isolating staff, which was unavoidable in the situation. But hopefully, I think it's amazing that that there's been a sizable increase in recycling, and hopefully that will carry on increasing. So yeah, I think overall a really good report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGonigal. Councillor Connell.
Hiya, it's just a really short question, and it's perhaps a bit of a technical one. I think it's great. It's all looking good. On page 55, it talks about phase 2 of the timetable, where it's going to go into blocks of flats and things like that. And I think it's very sensible that there's going to be a large 240 litre communal food waste bin. My question is, what if there's a spoiled material? If somebody isn't sticking to the rules, I just wonder how the council are going to manage that, because obviously you're throwing out more of people's good efforts if there's somebody who isn't sort of following the rules correctly.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Connell. Yeah, and I think it's important, because with a bigger bin and more people putting stuff in it, and so Andy, do you want to answer that? How are you going to deal with contamination?
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, it is a really good question. So if we do get any contamination, which we will have from time to time, the first thing that we'll do is the crew will identify it. We will then send out our recycling and enforcement officers to assess what has been put in the bin. We will work with the residents in that block to identify, why that shouldn't be put in the bin, what they should be putting in the bin, and we will be working with them to educate and to inform them and to work alongside them to make sure that we don't get the contamination again. However, if it is just one resident who doesn't want to play ball and doesn't want to work with us, we have got enforcement powers that we can do, which we don't want to use, but if we have to use them, we will do, to enforce that person, doesn't continue to contaminate and doesn't continue to spoil the efforts of everyone else within that block. But first of all, we will try and work with everyone to be perfectly clear what can go in the bin. We've got a full range of communications already to tell the residents what can go in the bin, and there's a suite of information available on the RE3 website which gives that out in lots of details. So everyone should be clear what can go in the recycling bin. But if there is contamination, like I say, we'll work initially with the resident. However, if we can't get any cooperation, then enforcement does remain a tool for us to deal with any contamination.
Thanks, Andy. Can I just ask, just to follow up maybe what you meant. Would that bin, the whole of that bin, then be effectively not suitable for turning into energy and etc. etc.?
It would go back to small meat for sorting out there. If it is just one or two items that they can remove and save the rest of the load, then they will do so. If it is heavily contaminated, that bin, it would have to go into landfill. Yes, unfortunately. No,
I can see that. Yeah, thank you for that, Andy. Any other questions on this lovely report? Oh, well, I'm getting other questions first. And if there are no other questions, Councillor Bonner, would you like to sum up?
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear the support for this report, and I thank everyone for their comments. Just as Councillor McGonigal was saying, we're hoping to see the recycling rate rise. I thought, that's something I should have said, because of course we are hoping to see the food waste tonnage drop, because we're hoping that as people are confronted with the amount of food that they're wasting, that they will actually shop differently and reduce the amount of food waste. So for me, success with food waste would be to start seeing those tonnages drop down. And that's why, although we are currently so much above what we're expecting per household per week in the budget, we haven't moved it all the way up to what we're currently getting, because we are hoping to see some behaviour change. I do want to see the recycling rate rise, but I want to see that through introducing more items that we can recycle, like, for example, the rigid plastics trial that's small meat at the moment, rather than through us maintaining the current rate of food being wasted in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I was more surprised at the amounts that my grey bin went down after moving all the food. It's incredible. It surprised me pleasantly. So yeah, good. Thank you. So the recommended action is on paragraph 2. We're basically noting this progress on phase 1. We're noting the timetable for phase 2, and we're asking for the results of the phase 2 rollout to come back to this committee, whoever might be on it. Is everyone happy with that? Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Okay. Item 13 is the RBC approach to delivering low carbon housing, and I think I saw Zelda Wolfley or Peter Moore. No, Zelda. The double act. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. In different places. So it's interesting to see how this works. Yeah.
Thank you,
so whoever's starting, please start.
Peter will start.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Zelda. The Reading Climate Emergency Strategy, which was endorsed by the Council in November last year, set out very clearly that one of the major challenges we face in delivering the Council's ambition of a net zero Reading by 2030 is in the area of housing. So emissions from housing make up about 40% of Reading's carbon footprint. And as the report sets out in section 3.2, the costs of retrofitting all of those properties to net zero standards are pretty eye-watering. But we think it's important to be honest about the scale of that challenge, whilst at the same time setting out the steps that we think we can take to make inroads into it, hence this report. The good news, I think, for RBC's own housing stock, which makes up about 10% of the total in Reading, is that we're starting from a very strong base. So the energy efficiency of our housing is better than the rest of the housing stock in Reading on average, better than the national average and better than the average for social housing across the country as well. And that's thanks to a good track record of investment in the fabric of buildings and in good energy efficiency measures, insulation, modern windows and all the rest of it. In addition to that, we are now deploying new technologies such as heat pumps in our housing stock, so that we're starting to decarbonise the heat supply that goes into those buildings. And as you heard earlier, we've adopted leading edge standards in terms of new build carbon standards, as was set out in the report discussed earlier. So a good starting point, but I think we all know that what we're currently doing isn't enough to deliver the net zero challenge. So the paper proposes development of 2 new action plans, one for RBC's housing stock and one for the private sector, to start to move us further along that path towards net zero. We certainly don't have all the answers at this point, but by setting out what we can do locally, we can also better articulate the gap which remains and which we need help from central government to fill in changes in terms of changes in policy and additional resources, as we've always set out since the passage of the Climate Emergency Declaration in 2019. So I should say all the hard work in this area is done by Zelda's team, not mine. So she may want to add to that introduction. The recommendations, Chair, are there in the report for you to note, but effectively we're asking you to note the significance of housing in the net zero equation, note the need to continue to realign our priorities and resources to align with that challenge and to support the proposed development of the action plans as proposed.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Well, thanks a lot. Zelda, would you like to come in?
There's not much more to say. Peter said it all, really. I think, you know, we are ahead of the game in terms of the council stock. We have invested a lot in this area. It's unfortunate that government funding isn't there to help us kind of move further forward on this journey because of the work that we've already done. But we are putting together a low carbon action plan, building on a current asset management strategy, and we will use the money that we do have to focus on where we can get the biggest impacts in terms of our current stock, while still carrying on with what we're doing in terms of our local authority new build programme, in terms of those zero carbon standards. And I think the other thing just to mention is, as we kind of trial new technologies, is that we've always got to keep in balance the removal of gas from our properties, in putting in new technologies, because there's sometimes a bit of an issue in terms of the affordability. So fuel poverty is something that we're trying to keep an eye on all of the time, whilst we're looking at new systems that can come into our stock. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zelda. Councillor Emerson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief because I think it's a very comprehensive report and I think officers have picked up on the main points. I think there's a lot of work going on within our own stock in terms of retrofit, and we've already spoken at length about our plans for new builds, and I think the local plan, you know, offers sufficient coverage in terms of new builds that are private as well. So I think the real discussion is about private properties in Reading which are currently existing, you know, and we have a very Victorian town, you know, I live in a Victorian home, and no doubt there's a lot I could be doing to sort my own house out, and I think it's a conversation that is really important given our commitment to the environment. And the council have looked at government funding, and where we have been able to apply, we have, and been successful. And Zelda touched on the fuel poverty scheme in terms of what we've been doing and helping 250 people on average a year in terms of those struggling with fuel poverty. But there's more to be done, and the report commits to bringing back reports in March regarding our own stock and private stock. And the council is also committed to employing a full-time sustainability officer to assist with this work, because it's a very large piece of work, as you know, the committee will recognise. So I think that's really good. But ultimately, when we have a two-decade gap in terms of what we're committed to as a council for net carbon zero compared to the government, who are aiming for 2050 whilst we aim for 2030, it's really difficult because there aren't as many, in my eyes, as many opportunities from the government forthcoming, because they've got 20 years in terms of you know, when they want to get there. So I think it's one to watch, and hopefully by March there'll be more promising news about opportunities. And I can see the Conservatives all looked at me angrily, and I'm not trying to start an argument, genuinely. It's just, you know, it's a matter of fact there's 2-decade gap, so it makes it difficult for a council to look at government funding because there's a different timeline. So we've just got to be practical and prudent about what we are going to do and the scale of the challenge we face. But I'm really glad we're looking at this area, and I think when those reports track back, we can have a further discussion in terms of what can be done and get that conversation going in Reading and nationally.
Thanks, Councillor Emerson. Councillor Josh Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm probably just going to echo again everything that I'm just agreeing with Councillor Emerson this evening. Shall I just applaud? Well, yeah, I probably would pick an argument with our friends in the Conservative Party, though, unlike Councillor Emerson, because I enjoy it. But let me say what I wrote anyway. It's fantastic to have an approach to low carbon housing. It's so important, just like Councillor Emerson said. We may have two approaches, one for RBC stock, one for private sector, as she's pointed out, and as officers have pointed out. I guess we don't have that approach yet. That's coming back in 9 months' time. That'll be born in 9 months' time and come back to this committee. Again, Passive House is mentioned in the report. That is the direction, is the right direction. Let's see where we can go further with that. Green councillors have tried to sort of nudge the administration towards a low carbon strategy in the past, Chair. You'll remember in February 2020, we called on the council to make use of the local authority flex, which in Bracknell's already insulated well over 1,000 properties. I know you voted against that one, Chair. And in February this year, we called on the council to invest in a home energy conservation officer to get more houses in the private sector insulated through tapping into any new grant and funding sources. I know you voted against that one, Chair. These would have just been part of any plan, obviously, and we really support that plan coming forward next year. The key element of this report might be 3.1.3, Chair, where it notes that more action is needed and the scale and level of ambition will be determined by the council's appetite for committing additional resource. So I wanted to say that we have that appetite and we will absolutely support Labour if they do too. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Josh Williams. I'm glad we agree on where we need to go. We may not necessarily agree on the tactics to get there. We are agreeing tonight, hopefully. Councillor O'Connell.
Oh dear, it's going to end up a bit of a love-in, isn't it? Okay, so my thanks also to officers for producing such a comprehensive report that so clearly shows the central role that insulating our housing stock is going to play in moving Reading towards zero carbon by 2030. And, you know, I also want to acknowledge the really good work that's already been done on our existing housing stock. But I think we're all recognising that that's just a fraction of the homes that we want insulated. We would certainly support any move to upskill our in-house workforce to handle the new technologies involved in retrofitting insulation and installing heat pumps. We also support using these newfound skills to offer services to other councils or private owners as a way perhaps of bringing in more income that could then be pumped back into our own housing stock. Our targets, I also noted that our targets differ from the lower national target that's been set by Parliament. And if we're to believe the figure in the report, I think retrofitting insulation and installing heat pumps to get us to a zero carbon state by 2030 would require about 2 billion in funding. And obviously we can't get that amount of money alone, and it's incredibly unlikely that the government in Westminster is going to give us any help. So I guess are we admitting, as we agree the targets, that we're not going to reach those targets? And you know, is there anyone in the current government listening to us as we try and tackle this climate change?
It's kind of surprising, and this emphasises it. Well, it's a bit surprising to me, just how big a part housing plays in. You know, we think about cars and emissions and those kind of things. Industry, housing is a really important piece of the jigsaw, and the shift that's going on at the moment from more efficient boilers, where we were a few years ago, into not away from gas completely, into different forms of heating, is an important one, and it's going to be really expensive, you know, to get there. And yeah, I think as a council we're going to struggle to come up with the funds ourselves. So yeah, well, I think, you know, it's a national problem. We're going to need help, and let's hope we can get it. Councillor Rowland, I think you signalled, didn't you?
I did, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Yes, I just like to say something very quickly. I mean, I was kind of alarmed that Councillor Emberson wasn't going to raise an argument actually with the guys across the room there, with the Tories and Conservatives in this point. You know, this is something that is obviously a real issue, and we all collectively, as an entire council, agreed to aim for 2030. And the fact that we do have a government that's sitting down there and not saying that we've got to meet these targets till 2050 is a real problem. And it's not going to get easier or prettier. We are just going to have to be dedicated as a council. Obviously, the monies and funding is absolutely eye-watering, but I'm really proud of what what our council housing is doing, and I think that Councillor Williams, Councillor Emerson, maybe one or two in here also sit on planning, and so ensuring that when planning applications come forward, that we're getting the best out is something that we've already seen coming through, certainly in our council stock, and something that we certainly can insist on going forward. I was also pleased that Councillor Emerson mentioned about the fact that she lives in a Victorian house and how much of our housing stock in this town is older housing. As you know, part of my lead portfolio thing says heritage there too, and so I'm working with a national organization called Heritage Declares, which talks about a whole house approach in terms of taking care of heritage housing, and so that you're not really going to sacrifice your beautiful heritage property in ways that you think with UPVC and everything else, that all of those kind of things. So that's actually a really important step when we think about the housing in the town and how we can actually work with a whole house approach to reducing the carbon footprint of our older housing stock. But it is, again, an excellent report, and we will be bullish in this council to the extent that we can be, you know, and I look forward to it. But it's not going to be an easy road, because these are the numbers that really can cause us an issue in making 2030 happen. So thank you.
I think that's safe to say. That's right. I think I agree with you on the UPVC thing. Flipping out. I think it's very practical. Well, insulation wise. Councillor Emerson, do you want to come back if no one else is? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to put a few things in perspective here, why we chose as a council 2030 as, you know, our target, and some of our colleagues across the bench said many times, aggressive. We know this is a very aggressive strategy many times, and at the same time, the government was 2050, and across the bench, we were saying how you're going to achieve that, how you're going to align that strategy when central is 2050, and we are saying 2030. The answer we need to look at is because it was a national manifesto within the Corbyn time, where you nationally wanted to achieve that 2030 strategy, and that's why locally that was the approach. So that was a bit of context we need to put in there. So now we hear some noises like this is not achievable, this is all government and everything. But yeah, just for the perspective, we need to make sure that we are aligned with that thought process, not just, you know.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Magnani.
Yeah, I would just like to say I really hope we can achieve it by 2030, because I'm getting very old now and I won't be alive after that. If I am, I'll be the oldest woman in this country. But then I really think, and I forget the politics of this, I totally agree with you. We should be working for 2030. And it doesn't just boil down to how we do our housing. I spoke earlier about I'm a keen gardener, and I've been using materials which would have normally gone into landfill. And I've been using those materials so that use in the garden, simply making pathways and things like that, rubber being used for hedging instead of cutting down trees and stuff. So we all have a part to play in this. And I really support this council, forgetting my politics, nothing to do with that. We will do it before 2030.
Thank you, Councillor Magnani. A bit of positivity. I think like 2050 is like one of those dates that's forever, like enough in the future. You don't have to do anything. It's like nuclear fusion. It's always like that amount of time just over the horizon. I think the difference is 2030 actually focuses the mind And you can see that we've brought, we're bringing forward so much stuff that is contributing to trying to meet that target. It does promote action, and you've seen action from this council. Councillor Emberson, do you want to sum up now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to go backwards in terms of responding to councillors because I'm just bemused by Councillor Singh as ever. Really grateful for Councillor Mangani's intervention there. I think it's something that's not political, and that's the reason I said I don't want to have an argument. If I wanted to have an argument, I'd talk about the Green Homes grant, which failed, and the various schemes that have failed under the Conservative government, and I did not mention them. But now Councillor Archting is starting to bring up Corbyn. This isn't a parliamentary hustings. This is Reading Borough Council meeting where we're talking about green homes going forward. And I think his comments were misplaced about political nonsense, to be honest, which is really disappointing. So I just wanted to put that out there, but grateful that the Councillor Mangani did, echo comments from her group regarding commitment to work alongside with us to make this done. And the reason I didn't have a go earlier is because 3 out of 4 were not paying attention to me, and then they suddenly did as soon as I said Conservative. And I thought maybe one of the Conservative members will come along and talk about how they're going to have a chat with Alok, Alok Sharma, who's quite influential in terms of climate change, and none of them did. So I'm really grateful for Councillor Mangani's intervention, as I say. And I will, go full throttle when I need to. So thanks, Councillor Singh, for giving me ability to do that. So responding to previous comments, Councillor Williams referred to the EcoFlex scheme, and I just wanted to be clear in terms of why the council has not focused on this scheme, and that is because it primarily focuses on gas boiler replacements and thereby locks dependence on fossil fuels. So whilst in Bracknell this might have been something that suited them, it doesn't suit Reading because we're trying to go net carbon neutral by 2030, not continue with the gas boilers, and the scheme ends in March 2022, so it would be quite difficult in terms of getting sufficient funding to make sure we can make a big dent. But I have no doubt that we will definitely look at government funding, and in terms of applying, we always will when it suits the needs, which in this instance it did not. I think Councillor O'Connell made a very good point in terms of, the commitment we've made and if it's feasible. And I think that's a discussion we have to have. And come March, when we have the action plans in front of us, we can have that conversation. And the climate change agenda is reported annually to committees, and housing will be a big part of that, as the chair has said this evening. But I think it's, really important to know the scale of the challenge, and that's what we have noted tonight. So I think I've picked up on everything that was mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Emberson. If we're done with that discussion, can we go back to the recommended action, which is paragraph 2. So we're basically noting, well, we're also supporting. That's nice. Yes, so unless anyone disagrees, I don't think I picked up any dissent. We'll go forward with that recommended action. Thank you. Agenda item 14 is the electrical safety standards in the private rented sector. And that's going to be Yasmin. Would you like to introduce that report?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So this report sets out the provisions of the electrical safety standards in the private rented sector, England Regulations 2020, which came into force on the 1st of June 2020. They applied to all new tenancies at that time and were extended to all tenancies from the 1st of April 2021. The regulations place duties upon landlords, private landlords, to ensure that electrical installations in their properties are tested every 5 years, and that these electrics must meet relevant standards, and that they must prove to tenants that they've undertaken the necessary checks. In the case where landlords fail to comply with their duties, as a local authority, we have the power to impose financial penalties as part of these regulations and part of the delegation we're seeking this evening. The report also presents the Tenants Fee Act 2019, which came into force on the 1st of June 2019, and that was for new tenancies and was subsequently extended to cover all tenancies from the 1st of June 2020. The Tenants Fee Act prohibits the charging of fees in respect of tenancies other than those that are specifically permitted in accordance with Schedule 1 of the Tenants Fees Act, which includes rent, limiting tenancy deposit to 5 weeks rent, limiting holding deposits to 1 week's rent, default payments, payments for variations or assignment of tenancy. The Tenant Fees Act 2019 provides the enforcement authority, the local authority again, the ability to impose financial penalties should these regulations not be adhered to. In the case of both of these, the Electrical Safety Standards Regulations and the Tenants Fees Act, as a local authority, we must be satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that the breach that has occurred, that a breach has occurred before we go down the road of imposing a financial penalty. These measures, alongside the existing enforcement powers that we already have that are detailed in the Housing Standards Enforcement Policy, will assist us in tackling criminal landlords and agents, as well as contributing to improving housing standards in the borough. That's just a quick summary of the report. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks very much, Yasmin. That's excellent. I'll go to Councillor Emerson in a second, but you know, this council has long had a proud record of standing up for people who rent in the private sector. It's a very important housing sector in the town, and people across a spectrum of different incomes and vulnerabilities rent in the private sector, and those people look to us at the council, the officers and members of the council, to use our powers where we can to stand up for them sometimes against the minority of landlords who don't care about their tenants, basically, and have them living in unsafe properties, and we've always done that and will continue to do that. Councillor Emerson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief because it is a very perfunctory report whereby we are kind of acknowledging that we're taking on these extra enforcement possibilities from government, and I think, you know, that's really welcome that these new legislative frameworks have been put in place that enable us to carry on with enforcement in private sector. And I think you're right, Chair, that, you know, whilst we talk a lot about our own stock as we have tonight, you know, the private sector is equally important, and we know there's a lot of people in the town who are faced with horrendous landlords. And, you know, indeed, I've got several bits of casework at the moment where this is the case. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the work that the private sector team are doing. You know, we've just had the eviction ban lifted, and I know the team are very overwhelmed in terms of, you know, their general caseload. And I'm really grateful for all the work they have done, you know, throughout the pandemic, where private sector, you know, is a real issue in some areas of the town. Whilst we do have, you know, really good landlords who sign up to our rent guarantee scheme, etc., we do have some who are not following legislation, and that is where enforcement is needed. And it's really important we, you know, take the whole scope in terms of what we can do. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank officers at this meeting. I know it's a very perfunctory report, but I'd just like to do that because it has been a difficult time for the team.
Councillor Emerson. Does anyone else want to speak on this? No. Okay, if not, we'll move swiftly to the football. No, we'll move swiftly to the recommended action, paragraph 2, as printed there. There's a delegated authority, delegated authorities there for the officers to work with Councillor Emerson to use these powers, and that the revenue arising from financial penalties will be reinvested in regulatory services. That's a really important way of getting funding for these services in the private rented sector housing team. Everyone's happy? We'll agree that. Thank you. Okay, moving swiftly on to libraries, I think. Yes, item 15 is Reading Libraries, the future strategic direction. Simon Smith is here online. Will you introduce the report, Simon?
Yeah, that's fine. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Committee. So the report is regarding the future strategic direction of the library service. It's all set out there. Just to go through the key areas, really. It highlights that we've gone through some substantial change over the last 5 to 6 years. It highlights that we've made great efforts with additional income into the service as well to offset some of the budgetary issues we've had. And really the thrust of the report is to kind of go through a really detailed look in a way we've never done before at all of the library data from the last full pre-COVID year. So that's over 1 million transactions. And we've been able to go through and look at where people are using the service, when they're using the service, who they are, how old they are, what they're borrowing. And I think the most exciting part of it for me is to overlay that data against the maps of the borough down to a really detailed area to show where people are, where people aren't using the library so much, and then overlaying other factors such as multiple deprivation, those sorts of things. So to do all of that work to try and then suggest areas that we should be concentrating on in the future strategy. And the report is really setting some of those things out and is seeking permission to start a consultation with residents, users and non-users, and wider groups as well. Along what are people okay really with these as our strategic themes, the aim being here's what we think is important, here's what we've discovered, let us know what you think, and then coming back to committee in November with a full strategy and highlighting what we've learned from the consultation exercises which was run over the summer months. So that lays all of that out. Just to be clear, the strategic themes that we're suggesting that do also link into all of the other key strategies which are referenced in the document is around supporting recovery, COVID, helping children and young people. So children and young people's books are about a half of all the books we issue, so they're a huge part of the service. Improving digital inclusion and making sure that we continue to be one of the key places to help with that in Reading with our public access computers and Wi-Fi. Supporting improvement in health, wellbeing and literacy, and providing good access to quality cultural experiences as well, and that's in line with both local and national strategies. As well as that consultation, there's also some notes in there about consulting on changes to Central Library. So it references the potential to refurbish or relocate Central Library. It lists the reasons for doing so, and it's asking the public, if we were to do that, what would you like to see? What should we do? What should we not do? And there's also a potential consultation that we're asking about on looking at how we deliver aspects of the home library service. And just to be clear on that, it would be that every customer who currently uses the service would still use the service. And it's been running slightly differently over COVID times, and we'd look to make that change a permanent one potentially. So it's an initial ask of customers as to what would they have concerns over that, or would they be comfortable with that? And then should we then take that forward, we would again come back to committee for a decision on that, which could be subject to further consultation. And just finally, from me, I think that one of the really important parts of the report is just to highlight the work that the library service has done over the period. We were closed completely from March until July, but we have had a physical library service since then. We've had over 5,000 customers come into the buildings. We are gradually reopening. We have gone slowly and cautiously, but we're doing it safely. And if you add the digital, as the infographic in the report shows, if you add the digital and the physical issues together, libraries aren't all about issues, but I think over the last year it's been a really key part to make sure people are having access to stuff for a variety of reasons. It's still over 100,000 issues of items, which given the year we've had and the huge increase in digital lending that we've seen, and the fact that libraries have been open throughout lockdowns 2 and 3, they're now gradually coming back with more hours and more services. and I'm really proud of what we've managed to achieve. I know we've got a long way to go. We are ambitious for the service, but just I think we'd like to put that on record as thanks to the staff and thanks to customers for bearing with us.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's an interesting report because it's starts with the 2.3. There's the key strategic principles, but also it goes in. Some of these proposals are quite detailed as well. So it's all the way from the strategic to the detail. But it is about a consultation, isn't it? Really. So it's out of consultation, and this isn't the final thing. This is what we're going to consult on. So, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair, and I would like to thank Simon and certainly all of the staff at Library Services for an incredible amount of work over the past year, switching almost overnight into a digital world, away from what they knew and everything else, and to have had the opportunity to speak on a national level and actually have people ask us, been able to brag about some of the wonderful work that our Library Services has done when they've gone digital and when we've been able to offer that service out through various methods and increase our social media and all of those things. So I know that the team is very eager to come back as quickly as they can. And part of that is really about this consultation that we're putting forward this evening to discuss with members, because this is a library service that wants to do the best it can. I know that when everyone hears consultation, they're frightened. This is going to be budget cutting. This is going to be, I'm cutting back this, cutting back anything. I can guarantee you that is not the intent at all. And sometimes I want to kind of remove that word if it's not about something that we've got to make cuts on, because that's not what this is about. This is about us wanting to get the best service going forward and looking at some of those areas where with Central Library and about how we have our home library service and other issues to make sure that we're doing the best we can for the town and to make sure that what they want to get from the library is what we're delivering. We have issues, obviously, with Central Library, possibly with the building, but that's all to be determined in what kind of feedback we get. The other concern, obviously, and there's a lot of very, very interesting graphs that I hope members were able to pore over as I did, that talk about areas where we can reach out better and where work needs to be done. But in areas, ensuring that we reach areas of deprivation, that is all part that I can assure you is very much something that is our concern. And hopefully this consultation will allow members of the public to tell us how best they can receive those services. So I just wanted to give those reassurances to everyone, to encourage everyone to fill out the consultation, to encourage your constituents also, and certainly to come back to Library Services. Indeed, if you have any concerns whatsoever during the consultative process, or even to speak with myself too. But again, thank you to Simon. It's really been a hard slog. Every single step he's been making forward, he's got to go through all of our health and safety scrutiny and all of that. So each step has been very, very difficult with a limited staff, and delivering a COVID-safe library service also involves resourcing that we have a smaller library service, and it's just not quite as easy to do. So as you said, thank you for customers for bearing up with us as we bring everything back online, and a big, huge thanks, Simon, to you and your team. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rowland. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. I'll echo what Councillor Rowland has said. Absolutely, it's kudos to the team. Simon has done the fabulous work, and being nimble in that situation, just adopting, being digital, it's a massive effort, and understand how much effort it takes being from that industry. Libraries have a very critical role in helping people to realize their potential, and especially from people from disadvantaged background. I myself in my school days have used libraries, so I have some emotional connect to libraries. So I have a question and a suggestion to say. One is like the task force at Digital Culture and Media Sports centrally have innovation fund for piloting library services and see and provide some opportunities and see how that works. Is the team working in and aligning with the central government and the department? Second thing is on the previous strategy. What has worked? What has failed? Is there any lessons learned there? And third thing is a larger point, which is on the consultation. In my view, the consultations so many times have not worked. In our budget consultation, only 600 people responded out of 300 residents. So are we going to set some benchmarks there, and probably we'll be able to do much better for library consultation because people are accessing library all the time. So I suggest we should set up some benchmarks for the consultation as well. So yeah, to summarize, any lessons learned from the previous strategies? Are we working closely with the central government on this? And third is benchmark. Are we setting some consultation benchmark?
Thanks, Councillor Singh. I would say on your third point, something that I think members a role members can play is stimulating their residents to respond to surveys on things that can affect them every day. And I think we did that in Caversham. We did a consultation several years ago on the library hours, and actually people really appreciated it because libraries are kind of dear to a lot of people, and actually got quite a good response, I think. Simon, would you like to come back on any of those points about application for funding and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we kind of explore all kinds of funding opportunities when they come up, and if they're the right ones, then yeah, we do go for them. But yeah, we're exploring stuff that does come up. Just on previous strategies, we introduced a strategy 5-6 years ago. It was kind of slightly overtaken by the need was to make savings. So what I've learned from that is a mixture of being realistic, but being short and clear, but still being very ambitious. I think that's the key for me. I do want the service to achieve an awful lot more. It means a lot to me, and that means a lot to everybody else as well. So I do want to achieve really good things for the library service. I think we've been through a very difficult few years, and I think we will. What I would like is a kind of a well-presented. So what I want to come back to you in November with is a well-presented, professional-looking, proper but readable, usable, and realistic strategy as well. So that's our aim, to come back to you with something that looks good. With regard to previous consultations, when we've done them before, so I've been involved in 2 large-scale ones in Reading, and they've both been about reducing service, but they have both attracted, from memory, over sort of 1,200, 1,300 responses. So they are one of the consultations that I think the council does that does get a really high take up. We'll be working alongside some external people, some specialists in the field, partly for reasons of getting it done in a slightly different way, and partly for reasons of capacity as well, to make sure it's done properly, and we need it for you for November. So obviously I've got a library service to be reopening, so we need a bit of help with that, but then that's the plan.
Thank you for that response, Simon. I mean, it's worth remembering that those who've been on the council for the last 9 or 10 years, most of our strategies have been about how we've having to make huge savings because our budgets have been cut so savagely that it's hard. It's been difficult for professionals like Simon who want to deliver a better service, find innovative things to do to make our residents, given that deliver the services they want to and they deserve. Well, we just haven't been able to afford that, and our diminishing budgets have driven that. Perhaps now we might have a bit of financial breathing space that we can actually start to think kind of positively, innovatively, and that's what hopefully this report, when it comes back to us, we'll have some positive and innovative ideas. So unless there's anyone else, Councillor Rowland, do you want to sum up at all?
Sure, if there's no other comments. I just wanted to, yes, remind people, yes, about the prior strategies, and please do alleviate yourself of reading the numbers in section 2.1 of how our library services were cut from 2015-2016 budget over 40% in 2017-18 and 2018-19. And so this is a library service that has done an incredible amount of good with limited resources. But one of the things that they have also done was to make up that budget cut by renting space at the Central Library, which we know houses a number of our wonderful volunteer organizations in town, and also the visa verification service. So they've actually become agile and actually become little money makers on the side, and which has really allowed them to maintain the service. So again, great credit to the library team for doing that and figuring a way through some pretty stiff budget cuts. But I did want to bring that up and make sure that we all do realize that we are living with a service that is a statutory service that has seen cuts, and so that is a large part of where we're at right now. But hopefully we'll get some good positive feedback, and we've got money in the capital budget as we've outlined here, and let's go forward positively on this. I'm really excited about it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Rond. I mean, just like Councillor Singh said about his emotional connection with the library, that was like my first job, like work experience, not paid, was working in a library. Yeah, used to get faxes of books that people had requested from around the county and had to go around the shelves collecting them. That's how old it's the faxes, you know, amazing. They were kind of these machines that printed off text. Yeah, back in the so if we move to the recommended action, that's on paragraph 3. We're basically agreeing to consult according to the document here you've got in front of you, endorsing the consultation approach, and we're going to get the consultation and come back to this committee in November. Okay, everyone happy with that? Thank you. Thanks very much. So item 16, acceptance of the Culture Recovery and Heritage Grant. Donna's here virtually.
Good evening.
Donna,
Hello.
would you like to introduce this report?
I'd love to, thank you. This report is to advise the committee of awards of various culture and heritage grants totaling £527,000. We were lucky to apply for and receive £487,000 to support the reopening of the Hexagon and South Street Theatres and Reading Museum from Arts Council England as part of the Culture Recovery Grant Round 2. We also applied for and were successful in receiving £25,000 to repair Grade 2 listed chest tombs in St Lawrence's Churchyard from Historic England's Heritage at Risk Fund, and we were also lucky enough to receive £15,000 to support artistic and cultural activities to celebrate Reading Abbey's 900th anniversary at Waterfest, and that was from Arts Council England project funding. In line with the Constitution, due to the amounts applied for and secured, we need to report to the committee to advise you of those amounts. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Donna for all of her efforts in ensuring that we, in the cultural services area, we're taking the very best advantage we could of funding to keep all of our services afloat, operational, and on their way towards recovery when COVID finally closes the door on us. These are no small sums. Certainly to have gotten it, we made it through the first round and did extremely well at the high end, just under $1 million, and then with the second bunch. I think we topped out, Donna will give me a high sign or not, but I think we topped out right about at the max amount for that we could. Basically, this speaks very well of Reading, of Reading's cultural services, of Reading Borough Council's cultural services, and indeed of our whole entire cultural and heritage scene here in Reading. It's vibrant, it's expanding. People want to come around for it. I hope that most of you attended the Waterfest and the Abbey 900th. If you got tickets beforehand, that was actually a really exciting time. It was the first time that a lot of us had seen each other in a long time. So the money that was got for that was a long way to kind of coming back. But we do a lot of things right, and thank you very much to Arts Council England for noting that and for continuing to support us. It's really important. It is the icing on the cake for Reading, I oftentimes say, but without that, the cake would be pretty bland. So I do thank Donna and the team again for this, and obviously I commend this motion. So thank you.
Be a motion. Does anyone else want to come in? If not, we can go straight to the recommended action on paragraph 2, which is basically to note the successful application, accept the money, and then basically delegate to the directors to kind of spend it really. Nobody's disagreeing with that. Okay, well, as printed, then I kind of I precede it, you know. Yes, within limits. All right. I think we're okay with that. So let's agree action, the recommended action as printed on paragraph 2. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Report on the cultural education partnership strategy and action plan updates. There's Susie Lindsay. Welcome to this committee. I don't think you've been on this in front of this committee before.
No, this is my first time, so thank you very much for having me.
And now your face is about 3 foot tall on the wall. So
I'm so glad I put my makeup on.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me to share these amazing achievements against plan of the Cultural Education Partnership, which is also known as the CEP, and to give you an overview of the strategy for 2020 to 2024. The CEP is a partnership group made up of local cultural organisations and services, and their primary aim is to create cultural programmes that engage young people and children to deliver arts awards and arts mark activity. Arts awards are nationally recognised qualifications, and the Gold Arts Award is the equivalent to achieving an A-level. So since inception in 2016, the CEP has had 265,532 cultural engagements with young people and children. They had planned to deliver 750 arts awards, but smashed that and delivered 1,444 arts awards. They engaged 95% of Reading-based schools, registered 17 schools for Art Mark, which takes about 2 years, so it's an amazing achievement. They set up a Schools Connect programme, of which 10 schools are a member, so they can follow that and share best practice with one another and engage in CPD. And they raised an additional £97,000 of funding towards cultural programmes in Reading. So I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate all of the cultural organisations that have taken part in achieving these results, but equally thank you to Artswork, who are our bridge organisation and linked with the Arts Council, the chair and lead councillor for Culture, Heritage and Recreation for all of their support, because it wouldn't have happened without any of these people. And just to give you a whistle-stop tour, there's more detail in the report for plans for the next strategy that will run from 2020. The overall aims are to champion youth voice, to empower more children and young people, specifically focusing on global majority and those voices from our most deprived areas within our community, to develop cultural communities and develop there are clear pathways for children and young people in cultural activities, creative careers and employment in general, having clear employment outcomes from any cultural engagement, and contribute to the wider cultural sector as well by strengthening the CEP. And some of the actions associated with these aims are to obviously sustain these amazing outcomes and achievements that they've achieved over the last 4 years, but also to increase the number of young people undertaking training and achieving skills in appropriate accreditation, and making them ready to seek employment in the cultural sector, but also to use their creative skills more widely to gain employment. And also look at identifying gaps in engagement, specifically in areas of deprivation, because our core aim is that every child has the ability to access cultural activity. We'll be looking at improving inclusion and diversity programmes and representation specifically on the CEP, and also underpin mental health, wellbeing and employment outcomes for all young people. Our recommended action on this report is to for the committee to note the Cultural Education Partnership's achievements to date, to note the draft action plan and strategy for 2020 to 2024, and to delegate the Assistant Director for Culture in consultation with the lead councillor for Culture, Heritage and Recreation to finalise the action plan. And I'm really happy to take any questions if you have any about the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. That was really good. Thank you very much. And opportunities for young people, giving them skills to work in the cultural sector is, who could argue that is fantastic. And the cultural sector is so important. Such an important British industry, and so important for Reading. And nice guitars behind you as well. I see. Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this brief because Gigi's done such a wonderful job on her first go. Thank you very much, Gigi. And Gigi's a real tour de force from the Reading cultural community. So we're delighted to have her here at Reading Borough Council, and delighted to have her working with the Cultural Education Partnership. Just really quickly, the Cultural Education Partnership is the real guts of how we get arts and culture into our schools and integrated into young people. So I'm sure that, like Councillor Singh was before remembering his days with the library, I'm sure that we can each remember back to when we were younger and how we were affected by an art instructor or music instructor or somewhere else along the creative way, that even though we may not have gone into a creative field like I went into, but we may have gone into any sort of other number of fields, but there's still that understanding and knowledge and grounding that learning things and learning to see things differently as a child can bring you later on in life. And ensuring through the Cultural Education Partnership strategy here in Reading that we are truly getting out to diverse communities, to be more inclusive, to get into areas of deprivation where those are the real chances. Those are the really wonderful opportunities that really must be there for everyone. And that's what the Cultural Education Partnership does, and they do it beautifully. It is one of the most seamless organizations that I have ever seen. And I'm actually going to jump over to read a letter that the chair, Sarah Hacker, who could not be here this evening, sent. She gave her apologies, but I'd like to read that letter. Sarah was integral in 2016 in setting up the Cultural Education Partnership, and she still chairs it to this day. And it's a wonderful organization, so I'd like to just go ahead and read that if I could. So this is from Sarah Hacker. If I don't have her accent, but I'll do my best. So, Chair, I would like to commend this report to the Housing, Neighborhoods and Leisure Committee. The Cultural Education Partnership is an outstanding example of how culture can enhance the lives of thousands of our residents, and I am proud to have helped form it. I would also like to thank the organizations and individuals in our cultural community whose hard work has contributed to the success of the CEP. You will see from the report that the CEP has far exceeded its original targets that we thought at the time were ambitious. The 2024 action plan is even more stretching, and you will see the CEP reaching out to thousands more children, either directly through our many wonderful arts organizations or via their schools. And I'm especially delighted to see so many engaging with the CEP. The CEP is equipping Reading's children with the skills and confidence to embrace their creative side, which I hope will lead to a lifelong love of learning, art, and culture, as well as the potential for fulfilling careers in the cultural sector. The pandemic has shown us just how important creativity and expression are to maintaining good health. Many of us of all ages turn to the arts at home and online during the many lockdowns and restrictions as a way of relieving stress, expressing our thoughts, or just taking some time away from the restrictions of everyday life. I would like to especially thank those organizations that continue to deliver arts awards through the pandemic, adapting their practice so it could be delivered remotely. Finally, I would like to thank Artswork, who facilitated the creation of the CEP all those years ago and have offered invaluable support ever since. The remarkable results shown in this report prove how much can be achieved with partnership, ambition, and a desire to share the wonders of art and culture with children and young people of our town. Signed, Councillor Sarah Hacker, Councillor for Battle Ward. And I can only just reaffirm the words that she said and the wonderful, wonderful work. This is an organization that actually gives me goosebumps when I talk about it, the really great things that it does to bring arts and culture into our community and for our young children. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland. Thank you in absentia, Councillor Hacker. No one else is indicating at this stage, so we'll move to paragraph 2 is the recommended action. So we're noting the Cultural Education Partnership achievements so far. We're noting the draft action plan and strategy for the next 3 years, and we're doing a delegation to the Assistant Director and the Lead Councillor to finalise it. Are we okay with that? Yes? Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Easy. You can come back sometime based on that performance. Right, agenda item 18, Reading, that's the last item this evening. It's the Reading Museum Forward Plan. Councillor Rowland is going to talk about it, but first Matthew Williams is on the screen behind you. Matthew, do you want to introduce the report?
Yes, hello. Thanks, Chair, and good evening to the committee. Just to echo that the SEP does great work and Reading Museum's a founder member, so we're very much part of that as well, and really enjoy working as part of the SEP in Reading. So the report I'm presenting today recommends that the committee approves the Reading Museum Forward Plan for 2020 to 2025. The Forward Plan includes the museum's statement of purpose and key aims, stating that Reading Museum champions our town's unique identity, plays a leading part in Reading's transformation as a cultural community and a place of culture by actively engaging with diverse communities and partners locally and nationally, providing opportunities for high quality object-based learning and creativity, caring for our collections in Reading Abbey and encouraging physical and digital access to them, and providing enterprising and sustainable income opportunities. The Forward Plan includes an action plan on how these will be achieved, and the report notes that the regular review of the Forward Plan is a key requirement of the Museum Accreditation Scheme, under which Reading Museum has full accreditation status from Arts Council England, otherwise known as ACE. Accreditation is also an essential criterion for grant-giving bodies which we often apply to, including not only ACE, but also the National Heritage Lottery Fund, for which the museum was instrumental in getting the money for Reading Abbey Revealed and the Abbey Quarter. It's also a requirement for all museums in ACE's national portfolio to have accreditation, and Reading Museum is part of Museum Partnership Reading with the University's Museum of English Rural Life, and we are part of the ACE national portfolio until 2023, and the partnership will be reapplying for that national portfolio for the next stage of funding in 2022. Finally, the report notes some of the achievements that have been delivered to date by the museum, including the agile adaptation of services by our staff and volunteers during the pandemic. So some of the achievements include being part of that national portfolio that was awarded in 2018 to the two museums, and that secured over 1.25 million of Arts Council investment in Reading's museums. We were also really pleased to have over 20,000 people attend the reopening of Reading Abbey Quarter in June 2018 after the successful delivery of the £3.1 million Reading Abbey Reveal project. This included the reopening of our very popular Victorian schoolroom, really part of the school scene in Reading, in the restored Abbey Gateway. And before the pandemic, we were regularly attracting 15 to 20,000 school children a year to the museum. In 2018, we reopened a new Story of Reading gallery and the museum shop, as again, always looking to improve our offer to our visitors and to our Reading residents in the museum. And we were really pleased in 2020 to be awarded the Best Use of Heritage and Placemaking for the Abbey Quarter by the National Planning Awards, so real national recognition for some of the work we do with heritage here in Reading. We were really pleased last June to launch a nationally acclaimed online exhibition called The Enigma of Arrival, the Politics and Poetics of Caribbean Migration to Britain, that was actually created in partnership with Barbados Museum and the University of the West Indies, and we were very proud that that was featured nationally by the Arts Council England. And also last summer, even in lockdown, we were voted the best family museum voted by the users of the Little Ankle Biters website in Berkshire, Bucks and Oxfordshire. So really great when we get our users voting to say we're one of the best museums in our region. And finally, since the start of the pandemic, the museum team has created new digital content to increase and deepen our community engagement despite periods of closure. For example, between March and May last year, our resources were viewed over 50,000 times, a 200% increase before lockdown. Similarly, in the same period, our social media interest went up over 258%, reaching millions of people during the lockdown period. And since last year, the team have developed a whole new programme of virtual school sessions that didn't exist a year ago and are now being delivered both locally and nationally. And of course, we have safely reopened the museum to the public in a COVID safe way. Thank you.
I mean, thank you very much, Matthew. Councillor Rowland, do you want to add to that?
Certainly, Chair. First off, I'd like to thank Matthew for all of his wonderful work over the year and the work of the team. And it has been an incredible year, but once again, another agile team in the cultural sector that really was able to make the move. And Matthew, I'll brag about one little thing that you forgot to mention is the Bayeux tapestry that we have that is now digitally online. I don't know how you missed that, but that was one of my favorites because that can now go out to schools all over to show our wonderful Victorian duplication of the original Bayeux tapestry, which, having seen both of them, I like ours better. So, and also it's a little more chaste, but that being that, this is a required report to ensure that we've got all of our boxes ticked and everything, so that we can continue to receive funding from Arts Cultural England and also participate in the Museums Partnership Reading, and to continue to get funding through other streams. So I think that the aims are lovely. The goals that we've set forward are very sound, and basically it's talking about continuing to work in that partnership with Museum Partnership Reading to provide learning and training for children, for young people. And so we're also, again, reaching diverse communities with, for example, the Windrush project that I was just able to catch on lecture, where they had a YouTube lecture with the students on Windrush Day. That was a couple weeks ago or so, and that was really very exciting. To again champions Reading's heritage, which he spoke about, and how much the Abbey ruins have become part of our life and part of our cultural life here in Reading. And so how important and how involved the museum has certainly been with that, and to maximize opportunities to generate environmentally sustainable income and fundraising too. So all of those things as we move forward we move forward even in our climate emergency, are things that the cultural community and the museum are all thinking of too. So once again, I would commend this report to each of you. Thank you. Thank everyone at the museum for just the stellar work of constantly innovating and coming forward with new ways to reach out to the community and get those opportunities out to the entire town. So thank you again. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Councillor. And you just like it because of the little underpants, don't you? That's you like that one. So if there's no other questions, can we move to we'll move to the recommended actions as printed on paragraph 2, noting and approving and agreeing, that kind of thing. Okay, yep, lovely, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much to officers who are left and everyone who's all the officers who've attended online this evening, and thank you very much to the members who've come, and it was lovely to see everyone again in the flesh, as it were. And that's the end of the meeting.